Fix this helicopter, and I'll give you anything you ask for, the humble mechanic said, his voice steady but filled with something deeper, defiance, maybe pride. He stood under the harsh lights of the hangar, his hands darkened by grease and years of work that had shaped him into someone who didn't flinch in front of power. The CEO, tall, elegant, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than the mechanic earned in a year, threw back her head and laughed. It wasn't cruelty in her laughter, not exactly. It was disbelief, a kind of mocking amusement that someone like him could even imagine being in control, even for a second. Anything I ask for, he repeated, his eyes narrowing as he looked at her across the polished metal of the helicopter's hull. Anything, she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye, still smiling. If you can make this thing fly before sunrise, you can name your price. He turned back to the machine, the laughter echoing in his mind. The helicopter had been damaged in a storm, not beyond repair, but close. The company's pride, their only prototype, the one that would make or break $1 billion deal. She had called him as a last resort, and now, he was the only one standing between her empire and collapse. He touched the cool metal, feeling the vibration of his own pulse through it. He'd built engines like this before, not in luxury hangars, but in dark, cold garages where oil mixed with rainwater. He knew machines better than he knew people. They didn't lie, they didn't pretend, they either worked or they didn't. She watched him work, arms crossed, her eyes sharp with calculation. You don't talk much, do you? She asked after a while. He didn't answer. Words, he'd learned, were wasted on people who only listened to themselves. The hum of his tools filled the silence. Sparks danced in the air as he welded a broken joint. The smell of metal, oil, and heat filled the space, an industrial perfume of survival. Finally, she sighed. You know who I am, right? Nodded slightly without looking up. Everyone knows who you are. Then you should also know that time means everything to me, she said. If that helicopter isn't in the air before dawn, I lose a deal that took 5 years to build. Then you should let me work, he said simply. The arrogance in his tone surprised her. Or maybe it wasn't arrogance, maybe it was something else, something she hadn't heard in a long time. Confidence without money behind it. Power without a title. Hours passed. The hangar lights flickered once, then steadied. The night outside grew colder, darker. She had wrapped her jacket around herself, her heels long abandoned on the concrete floor. She watched him move like someone performing a ritual, precise, focused, relentless. Why are you helping me? She finally asked. You could have refused. Everyone else did. He paused, looked at her, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes, not anger, not admiration, but recognition. Because once, I believed in people like you, he said quietly. Before I learned that you don't believe in people like me. She didn't know what to say. The words hit harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, but he had already turned back to work. Memories she thought she'd buried surfaced. Years ago, before she became the CEO, she'd been the daughter of a small-town teacher. She had known people like him then. People who worked with their hands, who believed hard work could fix everything. But the world had taught her otherwise. Money fixed things. Power fixed things. Not men with grease under their nails. When the first rays of dawn crept through the hangar's glass panels, the mechanic wiped his hands on a rag, his body trembling from exhaustion. It's ready, he said. She blinked, stepping closer. What? He gestured toward the helicopter. Try it. She hesitated, then climbed into the cockpit. Her fingers brushed the controls, familiar but foreign. She turned the key. For a second, nothing happened. Then the engine roared to life, smooth, powerful, alive. The sound filled the hangar, vibrating through her bones. Her eyes widened. You actually did it. He only nodded, his face unreadable. She shut down the engine and climbed out. For the first time in years, she didn't have the right words. She reached into her bag, pulling out a checkbook. Name your price, she said, her tone soft but firm. He shook his head. I don't want your money. She frowned. Then what do you want? He looked at her, and in that look, she saw everything she'd tried to forget. The emptiness behind her success, the loneliness that no deal could erase. I want you to remember, he said finally, that it wasn't your power that saved you tonight. It was someone you laughed at. Her breath caught. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but the truth of his words left no room. "Wait," she said as he started to walk away. "Who are you, really?" He stopped. The early light caught the side of his face. A shadow, a scar, and eyes that had seen too much. "Someone you once left behind," he said, then walked out into the dawn. She stood frozen, her mind racing. Left behind. Her heart stumbled over the words. Years ago, before the company, before the fame, there had been a man, a mechanic's apprentice, quiet, kind, and full of dreams. They'd been young. She'd left him because she wanted more. Now she realized what she'd lost. She ran to the door, but the hangar was empty. Only the sound of the helicopter's quiet engine echoed back, a reminder of everything money couldn't buy. She stood there for a long time, watching the sun rise. For the first time in years, she felt small, but not in a bad way. She felt human. Outside, the mechanic walked down the dirt road, the wind cold against his face. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He knew she would never forget this night. The night when the woman who had everything had to rely on a man who had nothing but his hands and his will. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the pride and bitterness, there was a strange peace. Maybe he'd fixed more than just a helicopter tonight. Maybe, in some small way, he'd fixed her too. He smiled faintly, the rising sun glinting off the metal of his wrench. Behind him, the sound of the helicopter blades began to spin again. Steady, strong, alive, just like the part of his heart he thought had stopped working long ago.